Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about yet another JavaScript concept. So today we are going to talk about the switch statement, which is a JavaScript conditional that is very precise and is easier to read. So let's get started. So are you tired with the messy if-else chains? Discover how JavaScript switch statement can simplify your logic and make your code cleaner, clearer, and more efficient. So switch statement is a conditional statement that checks the value of a variable and runs different code depending on its value. So it's like an if-else statement, but it's more concise and easier to read. So these are the table of contents. So we'll talk about the introduction, why I learned the switch statement, basic syntax of the switch, understanding break, default, and fall through, using blocks inside case. So you'll see what a case is. Next is the multiple case values for one outcome. When switch falls short, no conditionals allowed. Real world examples will create a simple grading system. The next one is best practices. And then a comparison of the switch statement and the if else and all that. And then finally, we'll talk about when you should use the switch statement. So let's start with the introduction. Why learn the switch statement? So most JavaScript developers often reach for if-else chains when writing conditional logic, but in many cases, a switch statement can make your code cleaner and more readable, especially when comparing a single value against multiple possibilities. So think of a switch statement as an elegant way to pick the answer from many possibilities using cases. So let's talk about the syntax. So the syntax is as is. You switch on a value and then you create cases that will try to match that value. And then we have other keywords called break. We'll talk about why we need a break statement. And then we have something called a default. And a default is essentially a fallback. It's like an else in an if-else statement. All right. So switch compares grade to each case using the strict equality. So the break stops the execution after match. And the default runs if no cases are matched. So let's open my VS Code. And then we can see how to work with the switch statement. So we have said we want to talk about the syntax. So the syntax is as follows. So you start with the keyword switch. And what are you switching on? I could switch on a variable, a value. So I could switch on maybe I want to switch on an age. So here inside the parentheses, we add a value or you add a variable. Still works the same. So if I say 19, in this scenario, I'm talking about the age. So this is the syntax for the switch. So we start with the switch keyword and then we open parentheses and what you are switching on. So what are you checking? It necessarily doesn't have to be it can be a valid JavaScript data type, which will be checked using the triple equals. So the strict inequality. So here you can switch against any value. An object, you can switch against any value. So you can switch on a string, you can switch, but mostly we switch on values. So, and then we start matching. So the first case we can say case 19, then we return, no, we console.log case 19 found, and then you break, and then you add a default console.log no case found. So we are trying to check this number 19 against all these cases. So the syntax for the case is the case. And then what is that case about? What case should be matched based on the switch value? And then what the code block, this is what we run in case it matches. And then we break out of the switch statement. And you'll come to realize that in case you don't break, it will continue executing more. So you can have another case here. You can say case 18. So you are switching against a value. So you can say console.log case 18, and then we break. So if you don't break, we have 19, it matches this case, runs the console.log case 19 found. If you don't break, it continues to check if this case matches. If it doesn't match, it continues, matches until the end. So if we run node index.js, we can see case 19 has been found. So if we change this to 18, case 18 found. So if we return this back to case 19, and then we don't break, so you can see it runs this, and it runs this, because it will try to match all these cases. All right? Yes. So make sure you use a break statement in case you're using a switch. But we'll come to see some scenarios whereby you don't need to break. So what else can we switch on? We can switch on a grade. So let's say we can create a variable is equals to, let's say we got a B, and then we switch against the grade. Are you switching against parentheses the grade, and then you open curly brackets and start writing the cases. So we want to go up to A, B, C, D. Let's go up to D. So we can say our first case we are matching is case A. All right. Then colon. And then you say console.log. Excellent. Then remember, you break. We match the next case. So these are all the possible combinations. We can say B, then console.log, good, break, case C. So we can console.log there, break, case D, then we console.log. What can you say about a D? Try harder. And then, because we are done, so we only did a case for A, B, C, D. What if someone writes a smaller case A? What if someone writes something that is not there? Someone writes a digit. That's when we have a default that will run if no case is matched. So if no case is matched, console.log invalid grade. So if we go back here and try to run this, you see we get good because it did not match case A, it matched case B. So if you did not include the break statements, following through means it matched this, but it will continue following through all these values. So if you do this, you can see it run good, fair, try harder, and invalid. It matches this and then starts to follow through. So it doesn't even match, it continues to run the code blocks. All right, so and that's the syntax for the switch statement. Nothing complex, nothing simple, nothing hard. So let's go back to understanding the break, default, and the follow through. So we said the break is to break out of a case, and then the default runs when nothing is matched or when there's an invalid character. Let's say someone wrote Z or Z. You can see invalid grade, so it matched the default. So this is like the baseline. Like if nothing matches, this is the default case, and this is the fallback. Yeah, essentially it's the fallback. So using blocks inside the case. So as you saw, you're not using any blocks, but you can still use a block. So we did have our grade as B. So we could come, instead of using a colon, you can use this. You can use curly brackets, and then you break as always. and then console. So console.log grade b, let's say good. And then what this one helps us is that the code becomes cleaner. We can start creating variables. So we can say let x is equals to 10. You see? Then you can come here and do x. So you have a code block that lets you create variables that are scoped against that specific case. All right? So if you do this, you see good 10. Because if we did not have that, and we also in the let x equals 30, you can see now they are crashing. You see, cannot redeclare block scoped variable x because all these now share the same scope. But in case you want to have its own scope, you can always use curly brackets. Then using curly brackets, I can come here and redeclare x and no one will ask me. So I can say let x equals 40. At that point, this one gets its own scope. All right, multiple cases for one value. We saw something called fall through. So you essentially do the fall through intentionally. So we wanted, let's say everyone who has an A and a B gets a well done. So console.log well done. So what this one does is that it matches case A and case B. Then case A and B share this blocked scope. You can use the blocked scope or the other scope. So if you get a B, you get well done. If you get an A, get well done as well, because both of these are sharing the same outcome. So when switch falls short, so switch falls short because it doesn't allow you to start writing conditionals. If grade is greater than 75, if this is great, this is not an if else, so you cannot add logic in the switch like this, like grade equals 75 or that, because now this one requires a value so that you can switch against that value, not a conditional. Because if you say grade is greater than 75, then this one will be a boolean, and then now unless you have just 2, then it will work as unexpected. So what you should do, it works on discrete values, not conditionals. So for conditionals, make sure you use the if else statement. So some devs try to hack it and say switch true and then start doing this. But now instead of doing all this, then it could be easier for you to just use the if else statement. So the real world example, the simple grading system, we already did this. So there's no need of going back. I showed you how to evaluate a grade, but we can copy and then I can show you a hack to. So if you do this, we said we are switching against the grade. Then now we have the switch inside the function. And then you call the function, passing it the grade. Now you can bypass the break statement by returning early. So this one is called an early return. So when you do an early return, the function is returned and the function is like exited. So you get out of the function. So there's no need of even using the break because this code here won't execute. You can see when the VS Code is graying it out because we automatically returned from a function. When you return from a function, everything else is forgotten and whatever you return is what is spitted out by that function. So best practices, use blocks in case when you want to use variables so that you don't get into problems with variable scoping. So include break statements unless intentional fall through, like we showed you, unless you're matching multiple outcomes. And then group similar outcomes using stacked cases. So that's what we did. You have case A, colon, and then next line case B. All those will be matched with the case that is with the block that is in the other case. The don'ts, use switch cases. Don't use switch cases when your logic needs complex conditions like we saw. And then forget break and expect it not to follow through. Don't do that. And then don't declare the same variable name in multiple case blocks without using the curly brackets. So that's it from the switch statement. That's all you need to learn about the switch statements. Go and conquer. Happy coding. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and share with your friends. And that's it. Have a great one.